Blog Talk Radio.
Sex. Okay, I said it. Whew. But it's a lot easier to communicate the word itself than what you want related to it in a relationship. And even when you can communicate it, what if it isn't heard the way you hoped? If there were ever an area where communication gets dicey, it's in the bedroom. And it isn't necessarily easier for couples than singles. My guest today helps people, both single and coupled, develop the needed skills to get both what they want and to please their partners more without falling into shame or embarrassment. And I hope I can do the same in my interview with her. We'll be hearing from Jennifer Gonzalez, better known as Dr. Jen, right after my public speaking tip of the week here on Full Speech Ahead, so stay tuned.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at last! Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Each one of you has your own platform. Mine is a stage in a studio. Yours is wherever you are.
Welcome to Full Speech Ahead, the program where we look at communication in all its many facets with an emphasis on the spoken word. I'm your host, public speaking coach Milo Shapiro from PublicDynamics.com. Before we get to my guest today on communicating more effectively when it comes to the bedroom, here's my public speaking tip of the week. Let's talk about PowerPoint today, but in a new way. Sometimes it isn't appropriate to show a PowerPoint program in certain settings, or maybe the technology just isn't reasonable. Does this mean you have to go back to using paper notes, or go without notes at all? Not necessarily. PowerPoint serves two purposes. The most obvious one is that the audience gets to see your slides. But almost as important is the fact that you get to see the slides. So, if it's not reasonable to have your program shown to the audience, there's nothing that says you can't still have that computer facing you to remind you what you want to talk about next. Use an outline format and keywords to remind you what comes going up next so that you're not just reading to your audience. You're being reminded what you're going to speak about. There's no need for fancy graphics. This is just for you. And with the PowerPoint remote in your hand, it's much less clunky than shuffling papers and no need at all for a lectern. How did I figure this out? Well, one time the projector wouldn't work, and I had to do my whole program without the audience seeing any of my slides. It wasn't nearly as good, but with the program of the computer right in front of me, at least I knew everything I was going to talk about. And I looked comfortable, and I seemed connected with them, because there weren't any notes in sight, at least not to the audience. Okay, on with this week's interview. My guest today is Jennifer Gonzalez, Ph.D., sociologist, sexual health speaker, intimacy counselor, and sex and relationship writer in San Diego, California. Dr. Jen challenges audiences to think outside the sexual box. And from college events to women's conferences and webinars to her TEDx talk on sex, mindful or mindful, her video series it's called In the Den with Dr. Jen is available on YouTube, and it covers more topics than I'm going to be comfortable listing here just yet. Dr. Jen appears regularly as a sex relationship expert on Wake Up San Diego. I bet it does wake them up. And on San Diego Living. And in an honor you don't get to hear about very often, she recently visited the University of Southern California as an MC and to speak at their annual Condom Fashion Show to promote sexual health. Dr. Jen, welcome to Full Speech Ahead.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever had quite this full a speech ahead. I got to let you know, I've known Dr. Jen for a while, but much as we've been able to talk, and off the air, I'm pretty comfortable talking about anything. I got to say that for the first time since starting my first interviews, I'm actually a little bit nervous.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah, I guess so. And then if we wake up some of my listeners, I don't have a problem with that. But I'm going to give my listeners a heads up that if you're normally used to listening to more business-oriented communication or family-oriented, that this one is going to be a little different, and my feelings won't be hurt if you tune out. That said, I hope
my feelings will be hurt.
Well, I'm hoping they won't. And I'm hoping they'll tell their friends who wouldn't have a problem with it so they can listen instead. So let's talk just from the beginning. Tell me a little bit about what kind of work you do.
Yeah, so I'm, like you said in the intro, I'm a sociologist, and my specialty within that is sex and gender. And I've kind of most sociologists become professors of sociology or researchers, and I've kind of gone rogue with it and created my own, kind of my own niche, and where I do have a private practice working with individuals and couples around any kind of sexual, gender, communication, body image topic you can think about. And communication absolutely is at the core of all of that. So I worked privately with folks. I do a lot of public speaking. I have a video series in the Den with Dr. Jen. I do writing. My true passion and calling in my life, my purpose very much is to create paradigm shifts around open communication, around sex topics, around demystifying sexual topics, reducing shame, increasing comfort and communication, and ideally overall to reduce all the negative, shadowy aspects around sex and increase it as a path for people to feel self-expressed, to love themselves, to love others, to connect at really deep, intimate levels. And we're kind of backwards around that in the United States.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I liked everything you had to say. Do you ever get the feeling from people that communicate about this stuff, but that would take all the mystery out of it? That's part of what makes it exciting. If we talk about it, it's going to kind of be lessened somehow.
Yes, and I'm glad you said that. I tend to hear that more from younger folks. Younger clients that I have, maybe that are in their 20s, more than older folks. But I do hear that, and we're sort of taught that keeping quiet about sex is part of the excitement around it. But when we don't have a good basis of, say, sex education in our country, of open, frank conversations around sex, about even knowing how our bodies work, let alone how to please ourselves, when there is so much shame around it, when there's so much silence. The mystery ends up being that people misunderstand each other, they're disappointed, they have unmet needs, they have assumptions and expectations that they're not able to own and articulate, and then they're sort of setting themselves up for failure in relationships. So, the mystery, what I do with folks is, if I have a couple and they've kind of said that thing, well, we don't want to take it out of the realm of mystery. And I'm like, let's put everything out on the table. Once it's out on the table and your partner really knows you and you know yourself and vice versa, then be creative from there and surprise each other and go back into the realm of mysterious. But if it never comes from mysterious to concrete, we can't read each other's minds, and you won't be satisfied in the long run.
Now, one thing you said way at the beginning of that caught my attention was that it's younger people who seem to feel that way more. I would think that the older the generation, the more discomfort. I mean, I think back, you watch a movie like Kinsey, where people didn't even know they were allowed to talk to their partners about these things.
Right.
But do you think it's generational, or do you think that they just haven't aged enough to get that it's important to talk about it?
Yes, I think that's different. And certainly younger generations now have grown up with the internet and unlimited access to information and education and just more normalized aspects around sex. But what that doesn't train them for is we still have, Disney and all these romanticized Hollywood versions of what romance and relationships are. And I think that's a lot of what gets in the way for folks around communication. They think it should be easy. They think this person should read their minds and not realize. And that's what comes with age, which unfortunately sometimes comes with bitterness and jadedness.
Yeah, true. I can see how that could be a factor. I have to undo that.
But it comes with experience of being like, oh, right, if I don't know my needs, if I don't articulate them, if we don't have clear communication, this isn't going to work. And they've seen how it doesn't work in the past. And I think, if I have clients who are in their early to mid-20s, they may have more still of a romanticized notion of what romance and love is, and that love can conquer all, and that type of romantic aspect, which is beautiful, but it's not always realistic of how, the work and skills that are required to make a relationship happy and long-lasting.
So do you think those overhyped expectations are the biggest problem we have, or is there a different problem that you see as a more common problem in relationships with communication like this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the main things is that we're just not taught skills in how to communicate well. And, I wish that was a high school class for students of Relationships 101, and where communication is a really strong part of it. Because where we get in the way is that we have our feelings and our thoughts and our belief systems, and that we assume that other people have those same things. And we don't realize that we all have our own unique lens of how we experience the world, what we've experienced in the past, and how we reread situations. And so we speak and we think we're being clear sometimes, but we're not really taking ownership of all of the assumptions behind it and all of the training or lack of training that we've gotten to lead up to who we are today. And so I think we miss each other a lot. We presume ill intent in other people when it's really our insecurities that are running the show. So I'd say, what it comes down to is that we're not taught how to communicate well. We're not taught how to, I'd say, own our insecurities, which we all have, and how to not let them kind of run the show in our communication.
So if this is the person who you're supposedly, we're going to focus more on couples because we could go talk for 6 hours here. So for just this episode at least, if we have you back, great. But for this, we're going to focus more on an existing couple. So this is the person that you have felt you could say vows to, or at least that you could move in with, or at least that you've been with for a long time. Wouldn't you think, okay, I must have been able to communicate with this person to keep this relationship going? Why do we have trouble communicating more with an intimate partner than we might with someone we don't know as well?
Yeah, because this person matters more to us. I mean, there's a couple things. One, like we've committed ourselves to this person, so what they think of us and the relationship matters a lot. So in some ways that can make it scarier to talk about the big topics, even though it's imperative, because you're afraid to rock the boat. And
it's a bigger deal if you say it and you wish you never had.
Yeah. I mean, earlier in a relationship, now we might not know that person as much, but you're kind of like, what do I have to lose? Sometimes. I mean, it depends on how people play it out. And ideally, right, you'd think the longer you're with someone, the more secure you are with them, but the more you have riding on it. So that can matter. And then, I mean, the more vulnerable we are with somebody, just the more scary it is. So if you've committed yourself, if you've fallen in love with this person, if you really like being with this person, ideally that's because there's been a lot of vulnerability along the way. But that also then that person has the ability to hurt you the most. And I think depending on how, say, for example, your parents modeled open communication or vulnerability and being able to work through conflict, that kind of shapes our belief systems around, oh my gosh, if we disagree on somebody, that means we're going to break up and this is so scary. Or is it okay? Okay, so this is scary. I love this person. I don't want to lose them. If I give them my truth, they could reject me. But that's okay. Like, this is all part of the process of being in an intimate relationship, and I trust that we can work through this.
Wow, that sounds overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, taking chances like that, and you brought up.
But it's so beautiful. I mean, I honestly think like one of the most beautiful parts about being a human, like we are innately social creatures. And so one of the most beautiful things is to be able to be fully raw and vulnerable with someone else, and to feel that you can trust that person, like with the depths of you, and that they could reject you in that moment, which feels terrifying, and that you create that space for somebody else and that you can carve that out. I mean, that's true intimacy. So it's the most terrifying thing, but it's the most beautiful thing we can share with somebody else. And for some people, they do that through communication and talking and sharing their deepest fears and thoughts. Some people do that through sex and through physical touching. I mean, people have different ways that they kind of be vulnerable, but it's really beautiful.
And for someone who isn't a good communicator, to have another outlet that allows them to show that connection to another person, what they really mean to them, I can see how that's really a thing of beauty. When we come back from this break, I want to talk more to Dr. Jen, about how she helps people get to that place where they can communicate. So stay tuned.
Not another boring conference.
Liven it up with Improv Ventures and the fun of improvisation. Check out motivational speeches and entertainment that get everyone learning through play and laughter. For smaller groups, Teamprovising is our teamwork and communication program with more feedback and fun, plus public dynamics, keynotes, training, and coaching on public speaking skills. You can be more effective in front of groups. Learn more today.
Improv Ventures, 619-542-0761, or see videos at improvevents.com.
We are back on Full Speech Ahead with our second segment with Dr. Jen talking about sexuality and couples. So when we left off, the question I kind of left hanging is, how do you do it? How do you, not the sex part, how do you do the helping people communicate? Hopefully you're not getting involved in that. But, and I don't want to know if you are. But
I don't.
Okay,
but
I actually should give you the chance to declare that you're not.
But I think that's important that we do have folks out there that do that in an educational way. I think that's very helpful.
Actually, I can see where there's a place for that, just not in the setting that you're talking about.
Right.
So, and boy, that could be a show unto itself with a different guest. But how do you do what you do, which is get couples to express in a productive way what they may be holding back on or doing ineffectively?
Yeah, and I mean, one of the most important things is to have like a process to resolve conflict, and because my specialty is the sex area, but communicating within that realm is kind of its own beast. But if folks have all this other conflict in the way that they haven't feel like they've been able to talk through and build up resentments around that, that absolutely gets in the way of their intimacy and to be able to want to have sex or be present during sex. And so I teach folks, what I call a conflict resolution process, which is, it's all about taking ownership of why something bothered you, why something hurt your feelings, why something annoyed you or you were frustrated. And the main thing is separating out the facts from your interpretation and the meaning of the situation from your emotions. And I think that's where couples miss each other all the time, is that when they're arguing, they're presenting their side of what's going on as if it's all facts. And that's where they can totally disagree with each other, and they can legitimately disagree with each other, because that's, some of those are the facts, but some of those are the interpretation and the meaning that happening had for you because it reminded of you of when you were 8 years old and your father talked down to you in a condescending way or something, versus the emotions, which is that you were hurt or you were disappointed or you were humiliated or you felt shame or you were afraid. Like, all of those things are really different things. All of those things are really valid in communication and in conflict, but if we don't identify them and take ownership of them, they keep getting in the way of really getting to the heart of being able to communicate well.
I can't even write down the questions I think of fast enough because this is so interesting to me. So let's go with this one. When someone is experiencing a hurt feeling based on something that happens in a sexual setting, and you're saying, you need to be able to express that. Let's just say it's the wife who felt that, for sake of argument, and the husband's reaction was, that had nothing to do with you. That was just something that was hot for me, or I thought you would like that. Is it better to stop in the moment and process that, knowing that you're going to potentially cut the whole experience down to the moment and may kind of fizzle, or is it better to afterwards say, hey, I wanted to stay in the moment, but?
It's a really good question, and I think it depends on how good this couple is, like how close they are, how in love they are. It depends on individual personalities. It depends on how much you trust each other, and it also depends on, like, if you don't stop it in the moment, are you going to be sort of like wounded by this experience? Is there something that if you sort of go along with it to not ruin the mood, is it going to like screw you up in the head in some ways or make it harder to trust your partner? Because in those situations where you're experiencing, say, pain and you don't want to, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain or fear or whatever, there could be a place like, say, if you're trying something new in the bedroom where you want to play with a fine line around that and riding it out. But if you've crossed a line, then it needs to stop. It doesn't matter that it's ruining the moment. Like rebuilding trust and communication and connection in that moment is the most important thing.
Well, that makes sense. If it's something you feel like this is something we should discuss later, but you're not thrown by it, don't spoil the moment. But get off my hair might be a right now moment.
Yes, yeah, because I have a couple I was talking about this with recently, and specifically the wife, and they are so open about their sexuality and trying new things, and she's going along with it because it pleases him, but she is getting some excitement in it, and he pushed a boundary a little bit. He didn't do it on purpose, and so she kind of made note of it in the moment, like, all right, we're gonna have to talk about this later. But I'm going to stay present in here because I know, like, he's not hurting me. Like, there was, nothing wrong with it per se, which has, and then, she brought it up later. So the problem is, under all of this is that we're not great at communicating, let alone communicating then with all of the complexity in sexual situations, which has a whole new layers of fear around being judged and being shamed and that there's something wrong with us and being rejected. So it's a fine line because, right, you might stop something in the moment because it doesn't feel right to you, but make sure you're not, like, shaming your partner in that moment if you do it.
I can see also one of the advantages in the moment is that you get to end successfully because let's flip the gender around because we keep going one direction. If she is doing something and he's not liking the way it goes and she feels like afterwards the conversation starts like, oh, here we go again. Now I'm going to hear about what I did wrong. I don't even want to try anymore. But if in the moment you could work through that so that it ends successfully, then there isn't that, am I going to hear about it later problem.
No, and that's a good point. Yeah. And I think it takes a lot of compassion and kindness and presence to both, speak your truth in the midst of a sexual situation, but to also know your partner to be like, hey, you didn't do anything wrong. This is just how it showed up to me. And let's just talk through this right now. Let's rebuild our bond, and then let's, slowly start being sensual and sexual with each other again, and know that, like, this doesn't have to ruin the moment, and that it doesn't have to be, like, afterwards, like, oh, good Lord, right, like you said, I can never do anything right.
I can see how that would come up.
Right.
This time is flying by. We got to cut to break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about how couples can communicate their likes and dislikes to maybe get a little more fun in the bedroom. So coming back right after this.
Got photos that need improvement? Freshen your photo. Old family shots that have gotten damaged? Freshen your photo. Want someone or something removed from a picture? Freshen your photo. At freshenyourphoto.com, we turn the pictures you have into the pictures you want. Add muscle, lose weight, lighten face lines, whiten teeth, fix darker off-color shots. See before and afters from dozens of happy customers at freshenyourphoto.com. That's freshenyourphoto.com.
And when we left off, we were talking about how can we more comfortably communicate our likes and dislikes with our partner.
Yeah, that's
not a simple one.
No, it's not. It's such a good question, and it's a shame, like I said, because of the context that we don't learn it is okay to talk about these things, and we don't learn the skills of how to do it in American society. This is really tough for folks, and I think, it's really important because ideally, if you're having sex or sexual activity in your relationship, you want to enjoy it. You want to make, you want to get pleasure from it. You want to feel more connected with your partner. There's emotional, there's physical, there's mental components. And so being able to be vulnerable and truthful, hey, this isn't working for me, but can we try this in a way that's speaking your truth but doesn't hurt your partner's feelings? That's such a fine line to walk. And I think the cliche of, like, starting with compliments is a very true thing, because I don't think we can ever get enough compliments in the sexual realm in terms of, like, what we do well, what our partner loves, how it makes them feel good, what they like about our bodies. We can never do enough of that. And so to make sure you're giving your partner lots of kudos for what they do that you really enjoy and what feels good or what makes you feel emotionally close or whatever, the energy they bring to it. So, starting in that place of being really genuine in your appreciations. And then, I think when folks bring up new stuff that they want to try or to share, new things that they would like to do it in a really playful way. It could be helpful if you're like, I love what we were doing, but I just came across this article online, or I came across this podcast by Dr. Jen, and and I had never thought of trying this before. I had thought of trying this, and I thought we could really have fun with this. What do you think about this?
But you're coming from such a healthy place to be able to already say that. I think at the point where a couple could do that, they don't need to be in your office. My guess is you get a lot more people like, I'm afraid if I tell her what I'm interested in, she'll never look at me the same again.
Yeah, and that's a tough. Right. That type of stuff often requires counseling intervention, because if you say have some sort of fetish or something that's outside the box, or something that's not vanilla sex, and that you've been holding that desire inside, first of all, depending on how strong that desire is, that can be problematic. Because if you're not getting those needs met, you might seek it elsewhere, or you're just pushing it down, and that could be problematic. And if you're so sure that your partner is not going to take this well, then that means you've had years of not necessarily communicating well around sexual topics or speaking your truth. And so that absolutely can take, some intervention. But for other folks, like, for example, there's just, if you grow up as a woman in American society, you're taught to kind of hate your body and to feel some level of shame around being a sexual being under your own terms. And that can just require building a comfort, and just of how do you approach those conversations? How does your partner approach it in a way that makes you feel less defensive, makes you feel like you are already doing a good job, they are happy with you. But hey, it could be fun to try some new things. How about we push ourselves outside the box a little bit?
Yeah, I can see how that's threatening to people to hear, but if they can get through that together, what a breakthrough that would be. I'm guessing that some of my listeners are going, hey, but what about us single people? You are talking completely about couples. Dr. Jen, would you come back and do another episode where we talk about this in the dating world? Because this is not a dating world of celibacy. This is a dating world where people are sexually active. We could definitely
talk about conscious dating and sexual choices. I would love to.
Great. We need to wrap up for today, but I just want to thank you for being so much fun. I'm looking forward to having you back on again.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I also want to let my listeners know they can learn more about all that Dr. Jen's been talking about here and much more at Dr. Jen's Den. And that's an odd one, so I'm going to spell it. DrJennsDen, drjensden.com. And there they'll be able to see her TEDx talk and her YouTube videos and learn about her ebooks right there on that site. If you enjoyed this episode, please check out other interviews I have posted at fullspeechahead.com. You can also check out that same site for information about my coaching and training in public speaking for you or your work team. I'm also available for my team building course, Team Improvising, where we use games of improvisation to look at teamwork, creativity, and communication. And my motivational speeches on risk-taking get the whole audience playing along. More on that at improvevents.com. So I'm Milo Shapiro, always moving, full speech ahead. Till next time.
Not another boring conference.
Liven it up with Improv Ventures and the fun of improvisation. Check out motivational speeches and entertainment that get everyone learning through play and laughter. For smaller groups, Team Improvising is our teamwork and communication program with more feedback and fun, plus public dynamics, keynotes, training, and coaching on public speaking skills. You can be more effective in front of groups. Learn more today.
Improv Ventures, 619-542-0761, or see videos at improvevents.com.